The knocks on the door become more urgent. Again, there is no reply. The plane carries on in its descent. Air traffic control try to contact the plane. There is no response. The breathing, Mr. Robin says, of Andreas Lubitz is normal. There is nothing to suggest that there is anything untoward, apart from the fact that this plane continues in its descent. The banging on the door gets louder. Over some 8 minutes, the plane descends 3,500 feet per minute, and then there are cries heard on this voice recorder from passengers in the plane just before the moment of impact. That moment of impact at about 500 miles an hour into the mountainside here at some 6,000 feet. When questioned by reporters, Mr. Robin is asked, is this a terrorist act? He says, it is not, there is no evidence that this is a terrorist act. Is this an act of suicide? He again refuses to ask that question, but what he does say that these were voluntary actions taken by the co-pilot, Andreas Lubitz, the 28-year-old with limited flying experience compared to the pilot with 6,000 flying hours experience. He says, of course, the deaths of 150 people changed this investigation from a suicide or an involuntary manslaughter to something quite different. 500 gendarmes, he said, were now involved in this investigation. He also gives more details about the recovery teams working in the mountain behind us here, and the fact that because of the force of this impact, when the plane hits the mountainside, the plane and indeed the passengers are literally blown to smithereens. He says that the helicopters coming back into Saint-les-Alpes, where we are now, the helicopters coming back are carrying body parts in plastic bags, which will then be taken to a mortuary and a DNA analysis. All this information, he said, was relayed to the families of the victims who chose to travel to this area earlier today. It was information, he said, he was given at midnight last night. The most dramatic revelations, the most dramatic and chilling detail of the final few moments of this Airbus flight A320. There are more families arriving tomorrow. They are aware of this. One other detail, we understand that the family of Andreas Lubitz came to Marseille along with the other victims' families, but have now left. In other words, unaware of the information that this prosecutor had and was then about to reveal to the other victims' families. Let's go live to Düsseldorf, to our correspondent there, Anna Holligan. Anna, the most chilling, stunning press conference that I've had for many, many years, but the detail and the minutiae of evidence and the appalling cries of the passengers in the final moments of this plane, it is something truly stunning, isn't it?
You use the word chilling, Tim, and I think the most chilling thing about this is the juxtaposition of that silence inside the cockpit as the pilot was locked out, and the co-pilots made that deliberate decision to put the plane into descent. The prosecutor there in Marseille said there was absolute silence from the 28-year-old co-pilot, who we already know has 650 hours of flying experience. And as he was bringing the plane down, the prosecutor said that there, of course, there's so many questions that remain, but he can't put himself in the head of the co-pilot. And I think that's what all of the families who travelled from Düsseldorf here today to Marseille will be asking. What was going on in his head? Was it some kind of suicide? Was it something else? It's inexplicable, and no one can understand that. We saw some of the families here this morning as they boarded that flight. We saw around 15 of them. A total of 50 flew from Düsseldorf here. They were clearly upset, some of them wiping their eyes with tissues, others trying to hide their faces from the cameras. And it looks as though the prosecutor has informed them before relaying this information to the press. And it's chilling, of course, for us to hear, but unimaginable for those families.
And that the family of Andreas Lubitz were either intending or had arrived in Marseille, but have now left.
Well, of course, initially they would have been like all of those other families, knowing that someone they loved was on board that plane. He was possibly in control of that plane. They probably went in the same capacity as the families who we saw travel from here today. The psychologists that we've been speaking to here who have been counselling some of the German relatives said that the worst thing for them, the hardest thing, is not knowing what happens. Now it looks as though they're starting to get a clear idea, and we've been speaking to Lufthansa all day, and this is almost some kind of affirmation of what Lufthansa have been saying all along about the pilot's experience. This was a man who'd been with Germanwings for 10 years. He'd amassed 6,000 hours of flying experience. And yesterday we were told that the plane was in perfect mechanical order. And it seems, from the detail we're now getting from the prosecutor in Marseille, that all seems to be correct. And this was a deliberate action taken by the 28-year-old co-pilot.
Okay, Anna, for the moment, thank you. Let's just go to Kinross and speak to a former pilot, Terry Tozer, who joins us now. Terry, what do you make of that remarkable press conference, that incredibly chilling press conference?
Horrifying. This is kind of a new phenomenon, really.